everybody, welcome back to Property Couple. I'm Leah.
And I'm AK.
And this is our channel where we talk about property investing, business and working together as a couple.
And today we wanted to talk to you about the Renters Reform Bill, which is due out now any day.
It's going to be unveiled.
It's going to be unveiled.
They're going to show us what's going on.
How can you unveil I know. You know what I mean? You think about unveiling a new car or unveiling like a product.
I just thought about being a bride and being unveiled. But anyway, we digress. So what is the Renters Reform Bill?
Well, it's a proposed legislation by the UK government to improve renters' rights, living conditions and general well-being for tenants.
Essentially giving tenants more power.
Essentially.
So you may or may not know that we've been tenants for the majority of our adult lives. And more recently, we are landlords, if you have been following on our channel. So we wanted to talk about this subject from both sides, how it will affect landlords and how it will affect tenants, and leave it up to you guys to ask us any questions in the comments. Obviously, this bill hasn't been unveiled yet, but this is what can be expected from it.
So we're going to start with tenants, and the thing that has actually been sort of grabbing the headlines is the removal of Section 21, and essentially this will mean that you will not be able to evict a tenant unfairly.
So tenants can't just be asked to leave before the end of their contract, for example, if the landlord wants to sell the property or live in it themselves. What they're trying to put through is that grounds for unfair eviction are no longer, which I think is actually a really great point for tenants. It just means that you've got security and you know that your tenancy is as long as it says. Yeah, I mean, on the contract.
We've had personal experience with receiving 2 Section 21s.
I know.
Over the last few years, actually.
I'll link that up in the cards if you remember the first time we were evicted from a property we were renting down south. We were not problem tenants, we had done nothing, they just wanted to give the property to their elderly parents. We made a video about it, it's actually had quite a bit of traction on our channel, so I'll link that up in the cards if you'd like to watch that later. So as well as more security and protection from eviction for tenants, another huge part of the proposed bill is lifetime deposits, which is exactly what it says on the tin. Basically, it's no longer going to be required for tenants to constantly come up with a deposit every time they move into a property. The concept is that you have one deposit that sort of takes you through your entire lifetime of renting as a tenant. Pretty big, when you think about it.
I think from a tenant's perspective, it makes complete sense, because there's nothing worse really than having to kind of stump up your first month's rent
and a bit more,
plus your deposit, plus all the other fees that you might pay every single time you're sort of dealing with a new rental. It kind of incentivizes you as well to kind of not lose that, because it kind of follows you around. And I think that, you know, if you are to do any damage to the property and some of that gets taken, you kind of need to top it up. So I kind of feel like that's pretty good.
I feel like it's fair, perhaps, to both landlords and tenants. We'll get into how that could positively affect landlords a bit later on in the video.
Okay, so the next one is that fixed term tenancies are going to end. What happens now is that you are locked into a contract, whether it be 6 months, whether it be 12 months or longer, and actually you are not really entitled to leave that contract until that contract is actually complete. The proposal now is that there's going to be periodic tenancies, which allows the renter to give 2 months notice to actually leave that contract. So it's definitely in favour of the renter there.
So it's definitely just a lot more flexibility, isn't it, for tenants, more suited towards a new way of living. So the next point is improved standards of rental properties. This will benefit tenants by making sure that they live in safe and habitable homes. My thoughts on this are, if you're a landlord and you're not providing a safe and habitable home, why are you a landlord? It's really not okay. All tenants should live in safe, habitable, compliant homes.
Yeah, of course. This is the thing, there are minorities and majorities.
Yeah.
Right, and I'd like to think that the majority of tenants live in good standards of living.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are going to be, you know, a minority of people that don't, and I think this really is a great point for tenants here.
So in terms of minimum housing standards, there's something already out there called the Decent Homes Standard, but this only currently applies to the social housing sector. So it's great that it's going to be introduced into the private sector. It means that landlords are now going to be responsible for making sure that their homes are free from any serious health and safety hazards and making their properties a safer place for renters to live in, which we think is fantastic, and it should be absolutely the minimum anyway. It should be the standard. Yeah. But unfortunately, there's a lot of slum landlords out there that don't look after their properties.
And actually, on the back of that point, interestingly, there's going to be the introduction of the new housing ombudsman. The good thing about this is that it's going to take pressure away from agents that are managing the property, because it means that landlords can't refuse to do works to the house. They can't refuse to take action when action is required.
Any disputes you might have will now be settled between the landlord and the tenant via the housing ombudsman, which is a very difficult word to say, by the way. Ombudsman. And no doubt there will be more disputes to be had.
It makes a big difference, because at the moment the process is our letting agent will say to us there needs to be a new bed.
Oven, or
in fact, the other day, a new bed is needed in bedroom 3, for example.
Yeah.
We could quite easily turn around and say, nope, we're not spending that money, and they have to have a
broken bed, no way.
right? With this new ombudsman in place, that won't be able to happen, because things will have to go,
through like a system.
Through that system, yeah. So I think that's a really good point.
And for the purpose of the video, we said yes to the new bed. Obviously, we're buying the tenant a new bed.
So the next point has actually been quite controversial from what we've seen. It actually splits opinion quite a bit. And this is the introduction of not discriminating any tenant that has a pet or wants to bring a pet into a home. So the government actually want to legislate that it actually becomes official that a landlord cannot discriminate against a particular tenant because they have a pet, for example. And the way the government are going to ensure a landlord against this is that they will bring in the introduction that if that tenant does have a pet, they have to have pet insurance as well. So
it's a little bit like having your deposit, but then also having almost like a pet deposit, but it's an insurance.
It's an insurance. They're going to essentially to say, look, this is from a tenant perspective now. So from a tenant perspective, you will not be discriminated against because you have a pet, for example.
Therefore, you will have more choice of places to rent, because right now it's really hard to find somewhere to rent if you've got a pet.
Yeah.
There's not many landlords that will accept it.
Exactly. But all we ask is that you have pet insurance. So it's kind of like we're trying to make it easier for you as a tenant to rent so that you are not discriminated against. However, you have to have pet insurance.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they brought in there.
So those are some of the main points about how this bill could affect tenants. Let's now move on to how this bill could affect landlords and speak to some of the big points there, with the first one being the restriction on rent increases.
Yeah, and essentially what this means is it's going to limit the amount and the frequency that a landlord can increase rent.
As a tenant hearing that, you think, great, I know that my rent isn't going to be going up all the time, which is fantastic. As a landlord, you might be thinking, okay, everything else is going up, interest rates are going up, my mortgage rate's going up, but if I can't increase my rent, then I'm suddenly working at a bit of a disadvantage here.
Yeah, exactly. Where this could potentially be a disadvantage to a landlord is all the rising costs, such as like the interest rates with mortgages, bills if you are, an landlord.
HMO landlord, for example.
Yep, an HMO landlord, for example. Things like this. So, I think from a renter's perspective, I think it's great. From a landlord perspective, I think it's also good because it allows you to be fair. I don't think, I personally wouldn't want to charge anything completely over the odds. I just want to get market rate. I just want to get the fair market rate.
Yeah, I agree. So the next one is the increased cost of compliance. So this is to do with a cost of keeping your gas and safety electricity certificates up to date. It could mean that these need to be done more frequently. So this could be a disadvantage to landlords that are working on a tight budget, or landlords that have a big portfolio where the additional cost of that on a large scale takes a real hit to their business. Yeah.
To be honest, I struggle to find any negative with this, really, because it's like
it's standard. I think
you want the absolute peace of mind that your properties are compliant and safe for your tenants, essentially.
And I feel like these numbers should be budgeted into your cash flow anyway. You shouldn't really be seeing that as profit. You should just be seeing that as outgoings. The next point is more accountability. So landlords are going to be held accountable for how safe their homes are if their homes are habitable. Imagine being a landlord and owning a property that is deemed inhabitable. That is tragic. Like, these are exactly the kind of landlords you want exiting the industry, actually. So I think this is fantastic because it just means that the industry is going to be more professional and more regulated.
Yeah, like you said, I feel like there's definitely a push from the government to turn this industry into a more professional place. So I feel like it's a good thing.
Me too. Talking about accountability, we spoke a little bit earlier about the the introduction of a new housing ombudsman. And from a landlord's perspective, this could be seen as both good and bad, because if there is a dispute with your tenant, it might be a little bit more lengthy and more challenging to sort of assert your rights as a property owner if there is a dispute.
Yeah, absolutely.
It won't just go through the agent anymore. It's like an actual body of people.
You use the word maybe. I think the word should be definitely. It's definitely going to be more challenging.
It's going to be more challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well as that, the lifetime deposit scheme could be seen as both a positive and a negative for a property owner. So as a landlord, you are responsible for reimbursing the tenant their property deposit, which is held in a property deposit scheme.
Government backed.
Government backed, which is great. But if that deposit carries the tenant throughout their entire tenancy, where does that leave you as a property owner towards claiming any of that deposit back towards fixing things that are broken and things that are worse than just wear and tear and things like that? So there's a little bit of work that would need to be figured out if this bill goes through. And it does sound like it could be a bit of a headache for a landlord to access some of the deposit if it's needed.
Really good point, actually. I'd like to see a little bit more detail around that if it gets passed.
If it gets unveiled.
If it gets unveiled.
So by the time this video goes out, the bill might already be published, it might be live, it may not be, but if it is, we will leave a link to the government website in the description of the video. Please let us know if you have any questions about this. I'd love to do more videos on Section 21 or parts of this bill that will affect landlords and tenants. But overall, I feel like this is going to make the industry a safer and more professional place. And for me, I'm excited that this is coming in. So I think a lot of slum landlords will exit.
I'm happy about that. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up and a like, and we will see you in the next video.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.